Alright, so let me grab my notes. Okay. As when I was leaving off, we're talking about how Joseph was interpreting the dreams in the prison. And Joseph said, the only thing that I want in return is that you tell Pharaoh that I have this dream given by God, and just remember me when you get out. And so, actually, what happened when the person got out of prison, he forgot to tell Pharaoh about Joseph. And 2 years has passed. So Joseph stayed in jail for approximately, at least we know, 2 years. And so the person ends up actually remembering Joseph by Pharaoh has a dream that nobody can interpret. And one of the people that got out of prison said, "Oh, goodness, I forgot about this young man that was really smart and he could interpret my dream, and I told him and it came true." And so Pharaoh said, "Go get me this person." Okay, so let me find exactly where that is. Alright, so it's Genesis chapter 41, verse 1. So Pharaoh tells Joseph of this dream. Okay, so let me find exactly where that is. Give me a minute. Okay, so Genesis chapter 41, verse 15. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it." "It is beyond my power to do this," Joseph replied, "but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease." So again, Joseph is giving God the credit for what he's about to do. So Pharaoh told him his dream, and of course you can read that whenever you want. But basically, Joseph said it represents that Egypt is going to have 7 good years and 7 bad years. And Joseph said, during the 7 good years, I suggest that you gather all the grain, all the food, all the livestock, everything that you need to survive during the 7 years of famine. And so, Genesis chapter 41, verse 28, it says, "This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he's about to do." Alright, so in Genesis chapter 41, verse 37, things are going to start looking up for Joseph. So Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, "Can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. So Pharaoh is taking something from his hand and putting it on Joseph's finger. Somebody that used to be a Hebrew slave, somebody that used to be living as a Hebrew. And he dressed him in the fine linen clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck. Then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command. And and wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, "Kneel down." So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all of Egypt. Now remember, I told you to kind of think of this trend. So Joseph was in charge of everything in Potiphar's house. He was in charge and everything in the jail, and now he's in charge of the entire Egypt. Now, if you don't know this geographically, Egypt is located in northern Africa, and it's a country, so it's a pretty big country. And he's in charge of everything in it because of his dream and because of his talent. Now, could God had used Joseph for that if he didn't go through what he went through? I don't know. He may have had to chosen somebody else. But God allowed Joseph to go through what he went through to prepare him for this very moment. So kind of just stop and tell you guys that sometimes when we go through trials, God allows what was meant for bad for good to happen to fulfill our purpose. And this is what Joseph's purpose was, to lead Egypt through this famine. All right, so eventually Joseph marries somebody that is Egyptian, and he has kids and all that good stuff. So you're probably wondering what happened to Joseph's family. So we're going to find that out in Genesis chapter 42, verse 1. And I titled this on my notes, Joseph has to face his enemies. So I don't know if anybody has gotten to this moment yet or not, but sometimes when we go through trials and we have to face our enemies, we usually want to do something bad. We want to say something bad. We want to have ill feelings toward them. We want to kind of look at them funny and, shrug them off. Let's see what Joseph does. So, Genesis chapter 42. When Jacob heard the grain was available in Egypt, and Jacob is Joseph's father, he said to his sons, why are you standing around looking at one another? I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy enough grain to keep us alive, otherwise we will die. So Joseph's brothers go down to Egypt. I'm kind of summarizing a little bit. And at this time, Joseph's mother has actually passed away. She had another son, Rachel did, and his name is Benjamin. And these are the only two sons that she was able to biologically have. Now, she did have some sons with Jacob through her slave, but this is actually sons that she gave birth to. And unfortunately, she died when she gave birth to Benjamin. So Benjamin goes down. I don't think Benjamin goes down to Egypt because Jacob wanted Benjamin to stay with him because he was afraid of losing him like Joseph, because Benjamin's similar to Joseph because he's from a woman that he loved very, very much. All right, so Joseph's brothers arrive, and Joseph recognizes his brothers instantly, but his brothers do not recognize him at all. And so what they're going to do, they're going to kneel down before Joseph, and they're going to call him king and all that stuff. And remember back in Genesis chapter, I believe it was 37, Genesis chapter 37, Joseph had a dream that was going to happen, that they're all going to bow down before him. This is that dream coming true, because Joseph is in charge of all of Egypt, and they think he's one of the Egyptians, and so they're all bowing down to him. All right, so Joseph thinks that they're spies, in which he probably is just kind of stalling here. Verse 13, Sir, they said, there are actually 12 of us. We, your servants, are all brothers, sons of a man living in the land of Canaan. Our youngest brother is back there with our father right now, and one of our brothers is no longer with us. But Joseph insisted, As I said, you are spies. This is how I will test your story. I swear by the life of Pharaoh that you will never leave Egypt unless your younger brother comes here. So Joseph keeps one of the brothers, so they would eventually have to come back. I think he sends them with some food. I don't know if he does it this time or the second time they come. And he wants to see the younger brother because he wants to see if it's true. And he also wants him to bring the father. All right. And Joseph tells them he's a God-fearing man, so he still remembers God and this, and that's phenomenal because a lot of times when people reach their pivotal moment in their life, they forget to thank God and they forget to remember God. But Joseph always had God on his mind. He always let people know that he's only there because of God, and that's exactly what we should do. All right, so eventually the brothers return to Egypt. Okay. And so kind of to paraphrase, I don't want to read all of chapter 42 to 45 for you, but they come to Egypt and they bring Benjamin and they bring the dad, which is Jacob, and Joseph had his servants washed the feet of his brothers, so he didn't do any ill will towards them. He showed them complete kindness, and towards the end he tells them who he really is, and they're shocked, and he had been kind of crying a little bit during this time, and he composed himself. And because it's really hard when you face your enemies and you try to be nice to them, it takes a lot because we are human and we want to do what our human nature is telling us to do, and that's to do exactly what they did to us, but he doesn't. And he gives them food, and eventually they all live in Egypt together as one big tribe and connect. And uh, he tells them that don't feel bad for what you did because I'm going to forgive you. And God used what you did as bad because you meant bad towards me, but God meant it for good. And so he tells them that, and it all happens to be one big happy family story at the end. But I'm going to have to close this video soon because my allergies are catching up with me. But I just want to let you guys know whatever's going on with your enemies, they're not like, God's going to eventually take care of it. And God doesn't want to see anybody hurting because he loves all of his children. Whatever happens, um, whatever happens to you is going to end up happening for good later on because God is not the author of evil. God did not create evil, but God does use evil for good in the end. And so I just hope you guys enjoyed that story. I love that Bible story. It has such a good ending, and I feel like that it represents my life so much. And if you guys have followed my YouTube videos recently, I tell you the story of how I became Miss Metropolis and how and still people make comments of how shy I am, and just a lot of things happened in my past where people bullied me, but I stayed with God and I eventually made it and I have succeeded in life, and it's all thanks to God. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story and have a good night.